like a doorbell ring in my ear when the recording's ready to go. Morning.
Morning. Good morning. How are you?
I am well. How are you today?
Yeah, I'm very well. I'm also noticing that I did some delivery last night, and I've found it just quite exhausting. Doing it virtually. I love working from home. There are great many benefits, but it's exhausting. It's so tiring. But I'm very well. Yes, thank you.
Were you enjoying the exhaustion of delivery, creating energy in a virtual space?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's hard, isn't it? Because what I've learned is the best meetings that I'm joining that are virtual are the ones where actually some energy is created in that 2D space that you're looking at. And so as a facilitator and leading the kickoff of a large program yesterday, I really had to think hard about exaggerating my body language and my movements and moving in and out from the camera and my arms waving around and using a bit of humor and moving to one side to another. And actually I saw when I did that, I saw people leaning in. I saw them paying more attention, because all the science is telling us that it's 20% more exhausting doing all these meetings that we're doing right now. Zoom after Zoom after Zoom, blue jeans, and it's just exhausting for people.
I think it's Zoom fatigue.
Yeah, Zoom fatigue.
Although one thing I've observed and noticed is that what this lockdown has definitely done is it has united all generations in the country with technology of video camera conferencing.
So it's so true. I remember. I mean, my parents. My dad, he's gone mad on it. He celebrated his 80th. He's absolutely crazy. He's sending off these Zoom invites to people he went to school with. He hasn't spoken to for ages. And I remember my mum, the first time she got a mobile phone. It took me 3 days to really sort of give her encouragement to send me a text. Right. And then for the next 2 years, every time she sent me a text, she'd then phone me to say, darling, have you got my text yet? I said, yes, I've got your text. Oh, good. I was just checking that you got the text because it's about the dog. Yes, I can. So I would agree. They really picked it up absolutely amazingly, as have I had to as well. It's making fun of other generations. I am that other generation when I look at my children, and my son said, well, you've been carrying it around in your pocket for the last 10 years, not just using it.
Yeah, exactly right. But I do think when you think of it from a work point of view, the expectation of clients we work with, when all of this happened and kicked off 3 months ago, when we went into lockdown, I don't know if you experienced this, but a lot of clients were questioning, can we convert this learning and development, this organizational development, this consulting world, does it convert into the virtual space?
Yeah, totally.
And there was a period of a couple of weeks, 3-4 weeks, where actually they were dropping sessions. Oh no, we can't do that. We're canceling this session. You're not coming in. And then it kind of turned and they were like, well, can you do that virtually? Are you able to run that workshop in a breakout room? And suddenly it's taken less than 3 months. And most organizations, I feel, are in this space where we're really quite happy and comfortable playing Zoom, blue jeans, as you say.
Yeah.
What are you noticing with leaders over the last sort of 10 days or so?
My goodness. I would say the number one thing that people say to me is, Richard, I've never been busier. I am absolutely frantic. I'm running from one Zoom to another. I'm getting more emails coming in. It seems to be more complex, more chaotic, and I'm exhausted. That's what I'm hearing. And and that leadership challenge of how do you then lead a team of people who you're not physically seeing, and help them have that have that pause in the storm and actually, really try and cut through all that seemingly chaotic maelstrom of work that is happening to people. That's what I'm noticing. What about yourself?
Well, I'm noticing that this is where leaders are really earning their crust. They're having to step up. They're having to encourage people to kind of wake up to this new world that we live in. And actually, there's this challenge that I find when I'm talking to people of creating a balance between results which need to still happen and becoming somehow more human. Becoming like this human organization where actually as leaders, they're helping people to come back to work, for example, or they're helping people recognize, when we were talking a couple of weeks ago and you were sharing how it took you a couple of weeks to realize that maybe you weren't having a great time.
Yeah.
I think there's, I'm noticing leaders saying to me, do you know what, Brad? I've been pretty low the last couple of weeks. I'm tired. And I'm saying, are you sharing this with your team? No. I'm making sure they, and I'm like, well, it's all well and good you being all bravado, but actually, maybe that shows incredible humanity and empathy if you're able to share with them that you had a really bad week.
Oh, yeah.
You were grumpy and that things weren't going your well. And you're tired of sitting on video calls for 7 hours a day. It's actually harder to do that than it is to sit in a meeting room and doodle. Because actually on a video conference call, we're just even more acutely aware of what's going on in the background. You can't even doodle because people can see.
Yeah, totally.
So I'm noticing this conflict between how we show up as a leader and this desire to be somehow show courage by not displaying any vulnerability. And I'm wondering if maybe there's something in that as leaders moving forward, when we bring people back into our workspace, maybe we need to somehow find some neater balance than one that just says, I'm okay.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And actually I'm when I'm talking to people about, COVID, it's almost old hat now, isn't it? How you doing in this sort of world? And it's sort of getting a bit tiring. I think I'm trying to flip it and sort of really see it. Where are the opportunities that this is allowing leaders to be the authentic self, which is what I'm hearing you say. Be authentic, show them that you're human. And I think that's a fantastic tip for great leaders to be able to do. They're not always all right. And never before have we been able to get so intimate. By doing these Zoom calls, you're looking into people's homes, for goodness sake. How often every single day I see a child or a partner walking in the background, or I see the cat walking across the keyboard, and I see, I can see behind you what you care about, the stuff up on the walls and the things you can see, intimately into people's faces, actually. And that is giving us a fantastic opportunity to connect in a very different way, not one that we had planned or wanted, but we're not always in our traditional suits or business attire and all that sophistication in our ivory offices. So I think there's an opportunity to show that authentic nature about how we're feeling, and I'm seeing something else that other great leaders are really modeling, and it's reminding me to do this with my own team, is that how during this maelstrom or seeming maelstrom of all this busyness and chaos of emails and work and bouncing from one meeting to another, can I help my team actually focus on what they can control rather than worrying and focusing on what they can't control? That's one thing I would say. And the other thing is, from a leader's perspective, is try and simplify things. Try and help people really see the wood through the trees by paraphrasing back the complexity that you're hearing, and making it simple for them, and asking people, through having more of a curious and coaching mind, what are the next steps? What are the top 3 things that are going to make a difference today and this week, rather than the list of 100 things on the to-do list. So I think I would agree with you. You know, a tip for leaders right now is to be authentic and show the real self. I would say it's around helping people focus on what they can control. That's number 2. And number 3, I would say, is how do you help people really simplify and crystal down to the things that are going to make the real impact today, the next 72 hours, the next week. That's what I would say great leaders are doing right now.
I love the phrasing of, simplifying, because so many leaders that I've worked with explicitly in recent years talk about their businesses creating sort of complexity out of simplicity. And we have to help them perhaps with the reverse of that. How do you create simplicity out of complexity? You said it there, reflecting back to them when they're coming up with challenges and issues. And maybe this is a real opportunity for leaders to help and enable their teams to think a little bit differently. Actually, we've all got challenges in business. Every day there's something that's going to pop up that's going to put you on notice that you're going to earn your money today. And part of that leader's role is to challenge the process. And maybe challenging that process is about saying, listen, does it have to be this complex? We're getting caught up in all the noise. You were saying everyone's so busy, all these Zoom meetings, chaos, working harder than ever. Maybe part of it is learning, just like it is in life, actually, to stop. Just to stop and reflect back to our people. What are we hearing them saying? I was chatting to my mindfulness coach earlier this week. And I asked her, how are you? And she says to me, do you know what? When I hear how are you today, it means so many different things. And actually, I have to really sit back and just think about, how am I? Like, really, how am I? How am I feeling? What are my thoughts, my body? Whereas historically, when you said to somebody, how are you? You didn't really care what the answer was. You just went, yeah, good. How are you? Yeah, fine. Let's crack on. Get into the chaos. And this idea, and she really sort of made me think about, or she helped me think about, actually, as a leader, the words we use, the words we choose, the way in which we communicate and engage with people is so important for that simplicity. Actually, maybe it's not asking, how are you during these COVID times, like you were saying before? I don't know how many times I've heard that. But actually, what are you learning about yourself this week? That's a question I've been thinking about this week. We've been talking about it for a few weeks. What are our learnings, our observations? So I've started asking people that instead of how are you?
Yeah, cool.
What are you learning about yourself this week?
Yeah.
You threw me there.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, maybe leaders have got an opportunity to be a little bit creative in this moment, to find their authentic style. Rebranded almost with something creative, something intuitive, something innovative. I don't know what you feel about that, but it's
I love it. I absolutely love it, and I would wholeheartedly agree. And it takes bravery for a leader to do that,
right?
And because what they have to give up there is their own personal need to get into the list of tasks or the actions that they want to, or the information that they're trying to get from the other person. Actually, it's about focusing and committing to time where you have to give of your own time for the other person. So if you're genuinely going to ask, what have you learned this week? You better be meaning that you're actually going to sit there for the next 10 or 15 minutes to really get curious about what's coming back.
Right.
Because if you're not prepared to do that, forget it. Because people will see straight through it. It's bullshit. It's a waste of time. People won't, it's not authentic. I've got this little frame that I have in my mind that I apply for anything that I'm planning to be a success. Now, whether that is a conference that I'm going to run for a client, or whether it is my business that I'm trying to grow, or whether it is planning a family holiday, I focus on three things. I focus on what are the visible outputs, what are the things that are going to make this holiday great, what's going to be the physical measurable output from the conference that I'm going to design. The second area is, what's the process that I have to go through to booking the holiday to generate the result that I want? What's the process that I have to go through to do the thing? And the third thing is around relationship. Am I spending that time really thinking about the feelings that I want to actually have, the relationship, the level of trust that I want to engender in that experience, the holiday, the conference, the coaching assignment, whatever it might be. Now, the thing with those three things, the results, the process, and the relationship, if you put it into a triangle, it has to be an equilateral triangle. They're equally important, which reminds me that actually I need to be spending a third of my time purely in relationship. Now, I have a preference for results and process. So if I've got a preference for results and process, my area of opportunity is actually get off the results bandwagon and really give people your time and build the relationship and trust. And actually, by focusing on the relationship and focusing on the process, almost have a casting eye at the results are then powered. So I think, coming back to your point, is around, how do we use creativity and how do we ask different types of questions? We need, what we're really talking about is all great leaders right now are spending more time giving of themselves and their time for their people to get close, to understand how they're feeling, to helping them in the work that they're doing. And I think that little triangle, that little model, the results, process, and relationship triangle, is a nice, simple one to hold in our mind.
I almost feel that to your right shoulder, we should have a little triangle right now just superimposed on the back of the screen with results, relationships, and process. But to your point, which I think is really important, we've actually got an opportunity right now to rebalance that triangle towards relationships, because we were chatting earlier, weren't we, about the intimacy of coming into people's homes on Zoom. And actually, for those leaders out there that are maybe a little bit more focused on the process or a little bit more focused on the results, they've got an opportunity right now to build a little bit of the relationship piece, because we've got to lean into trust during this time. We can't be watching what they're doing. I can't be worried about how you're going about doing your job, Richard. I just need to know you're doing it. So actually, the results are a given. What I need to do is make sure that you're okay in how you're doing.
Yeah, totally. And there's loads of, using, just, I don't know whether it's creativity or not. I think it's about being bold. One wonderful leader that I thought of today, he sends a little 30-second thought of the day on his morning walk, 6:30. He takes a little 30-second, this is what's on my mind today. And what I love about it is some days he's in a really down mood.
Right.
He's sort of like, well, that's how I feel sometimes. And he just pings it to his team. It's a little 30 seconds. And I think that's really quite nice, a provocation to just to sort of, this is who I am. And people are really drawn to it. They really lean in. So, those sort of little things, those little ideas that we can all have actually what I really admire about it, he's just jumped in. He's just doing it, you know. Let's not think too much about it. Do it, you know.
Right, and I think maybe that's part of what we need to be when you talk about brave and bold. We do, but we also need to be consistent with it. It can't be a one-off. So I can't send out my thought of the morning and then not do it again. You know, it's a bit like a podcast. I can't say you and I are going to produce a weekly podcast if we don't do one every week. I might say we can produce a podcast and take the pressure off. But if I say it's going to be weekly, if I'm going to say it's going to be a daily thought of the day, and I wonder whether leaders get a little bit nervous about, you know, being held to account on this relationship stuff, because what they're measured on, you know, how many CEOs and CTOs and CIOs are being asked the question in their virtual board meetings right now, hey, how many enabling conversations have you had in the last week?
Yeah, good point.
I wonder how, when we look at how they are measured, both by their shareholders if they're public, by, you know, board members if they're not, what are the questions being asked of them by each other? Are they just looking at their balanced scorecards?
Yeah, but this is where I start to get really curious. If I hear that sort of stuff, because I absolutely passionately believe and know, based on 30 years of experience of doing this sort of stuff, is that actually by focusing on the relationship, you generate the results. Right. So it's very easy for an external consultant who's not paid for those results, right? You know, of course, shareholders and boards are going to get very excited by the output. But I would argue, you know, if they do want to improve the output, focus on those two areas, the relationship and the process, and the results will come. I'm not saying exclude the results. The result, you know, I'm very result orientated. I need to be acquiring new clients. I need to have the right profit. I need to have the right EBITDA, and I need to have all of those sorts of metrics, and they're really important to me. But I know that my business took a very different trajectory when I started focusing authentically on the relationship side of things. So I know the pressure is to look at results. And I would argue the best leaders, the ones that have sustainable, best track record of results, they're authentically prioritizing the focus around relationships of their teams and how they engage and how they involve and how they're authentically communicating with their people, so that the people give discretionary effort, so that they go the extra mile, and the results happen.
As a question, then, I'm thinking people may be listening to this that are hearing that, they're going, yeah, that makes perfect sense. And by the way, I echo what you're saying. I believe it's a balancing act that, you know, for some of us, it you know, it looks like that. And it's about finding that equilibrium. How can you reframe back onto relationships when perhaps your instinct is to frame things through task and process and output?
Yeah, really.
What do I do to frame things around a relationship and still look and feel authentic as a leader?
Yeah, you've got to take a risk.
Yeah.
You either going to, if you're interested in doing something different, you've got to change what you're doing. Otherwise, you're always going to get what you've got if you don't do something. So, you know, why change something if it's going really well? If you're producing good results, the process is smooth, and your engagement scores are high. Why? I would say you've got the balance right. More often than not, the challenge comes when the results are not right. If the results are not right, what do we normally focus on as leaders? We want to change the process. We want to bring in a new system. We will need to change the people. It's more radical. I would say the best leaders actually in that period of time, they do question the process. They do question those things, but they do it with people. So the challenge is to engage people at those times and to talk about your need for seeing the results. And actually, in order to get those results, I need to let go of some of those. And actually, we need to spend time by getting your ideas, getting your thoughts, getting your involvement, and then making some difficult choices. You're the one that's accountable. You're going to have to make some decisions. But during that conversation, you would have got people on board. So a simple thing I would do as a process at the end of each night is to think about the next day. Get your to-do list out. Have a look down there and start identifying those tasks that you can actually reframe onto a relationship type of conversation. Asking for people's involvement, asking questions of what feedback that they would have. What questions do they have about this challenge? And I think the difficulty is when we're under pressure, we fall into our preference area. And for most leaders, it is our go-to place is let's focus on the results and focus on the process.
Yeah, it's
the detrimental of relationship.
It's a default position, no question. And yet I know that I was working with a leader last year, back in 2019, a European leader, but based over in Asia. Very results driven, very much process driven. Not so engaged in relationships, but understood the value of them.
Yeah.
And they came up with a wonderful way through one of our coaching conversations of how they were going to create this balance for them to be slightly more leaning towards relationships. He made them tasks in his to-do list. So he has his to-do list that he works off. So every night before he goes, home, or shuts down his office if he's at home, he writes out his task list and puts them into, urgent and important. And, he's very, very militant in how he's running his day. So what he realized was that if he have a conversation with Richard, RE, whatever it might be, and he put it on his to-do list, it got done. Yeah. If he had thought to himself, I must spend some time with Richard talking about, he wouldn't prioritize it. So he started to task out his conversations. Nice. And what he found was when he was in them, totally authentic, totally not about the process. He's like, I need to call Richard. And he would call Richard and he would have a really engaging, beautiful conversation, and they'd spend 20 minutes just talking about stuff. And then he'd get off the phone, he could tick it off his list, and he felt great about it.
Yeah.
And so this is what he did. He actually started to put onto his to-do list those elements. So even if you're on the extreme of task and process, there are still ways for you to create that balance and be able to engage and embrace this idea that we're talking about here, which is to lead with both challenging the process, but I think of it as enabling others to act. And that's what I view relationships as. It's if I enable others to act, I'm able to do that through focusing on the relationship. And to me, that's one of the key behaviors as a leader I've tried to instill in myself, and I've tried to instill in those that I work with or work for and with me. This idea of if we enable each other to act, how much more will we get done?
Absolutely brilliant. Yeah, that's fantastic. I mean, we started the conversation, what are you noticing? And we said, complexity, being tired, there's so much going on, the maelstrom of all these emails. And then we've sort of talked about what are the sort of hints and tips that we're noticing the great leaders are doing. And, I think what we've covered off, it's about leaders, the great ones right now, of being able to help people simplify. That's one. Number two was around how do we really help people focus on what they can control, as opposed to just stuff that's out there that is out of their control. The third one was around, focusing in on the relationship. And we've spoken a lot around about that, and authentically finding creative ways of using the situation right now to our advantage by being more intimate and personal, because we can look into people's eyes and look into people's rooms, and we can have that, and we can process that even if it's not our preference. And we know that in order to achieve better results, actually, we've been talking about those authentic relationships are critical, a critical part of the business process to generate those results that we all want. So that's what's going to power me for the rest of this week. It's going to make me think about what can I do differently this week to foster even stronger relationships. So thanks, Todd, for those insights.
No, and do you know what? I think one of the things that have really been positive on me is that idea of thought of the day. I don't know if I can do a thought of every day, but maybe a thought of the week. Sounds like a really nice one to ping out on our WhatsApp group to say to people, hey, do you know what? This is where I'm at this morning on my dog walk.
Yeah,
absolutely. Say hi during the day.
Absolutely, I think that's fantastic. Now it feels like we're gently coming to a close. Is it the same time next week?
I think it is, and what I'm delighted is there's no sign or hearing of the word Bradley today, so I'm just delighted with your.
Oh, I was going to close on that. I'll edit
that bit out. I'll edit out. Yeah, we're definitely drawing. We've come to a natural pause point, I think, until
Perfect.
Next week.
Thank you very much indeed. Take care. See you next week.
Richard, see you soon. Bye.
Bye-bye.